Okay, let's unpack this. The world of enterprise AI is definitely moving fast. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
But what's striking, based on the latest information coming out of the market, is that it's moving even faster than many expected just, a year ago.
Yeah.
If you're trying to understand how businesses are really using AI, where the money is flowing, and how they're actually buying this stuff, the landscape is shifting under our feet constantly.
That's really the defining characteristic right now, isn't it? Things that felt like exciting, cutting-edge experiments
Uh,
or limited pilot programs not long ago,
right.
they've just rapidly accelerated into core strategic initiatives. And the key thing,
Yeah,
they're now becoming entrenched line items in essential budgets, not just tucked away in like innovation funds.
exactly.
Yeah.
And because staying on top of this velocity is so crucial, we're cutting through the noise today by doing a deep dive into a specific, incredibly valuable source, the Andreessen Horowitz report.
The A16 report.
Yeah, titled 16 Changes to AI in the Enterprise, 2025 edition. This isn't just high-level speculation. It's grounded in direct feedback from, well, the front lines.
That's what makes this report so insightful, I think. The findings are based on extensive conversations with over 24 enterprise buyers. The people who are actually making these decisions and seeing the impact firsthand.
Right, practitioners.
Yeah, and it's also informed by a survey of 100 CIOs across 15 different industries. So you're getting a perspective directly from the crucial decision makers responsible for integrating AI into these large organizations.
Our mission for this deep dive is pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
We want to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from this specific source material. Think of it as your shortcut
Mm-hmm.
to understanding the significant shifts that are happening right now in how enterprise leaders are operationalizing buying and budgeting for generative AI in 2025. And, looking ahead, it's a nuanced look at what's top of mind for these leaders.
And the report itself helpfully organizes these shifts into 4 main areas, which provides a perfect structure for our deep dive today.
Okay.
We'll start by looking at the fundamental shifts in where and how resources are being allocated. That's the section on budgets.
Gotcha.
Then we'll dive into how companies are choosing, using, and managing the AI models themselves, the whole models landscape.
Right.
Following that, we'll explore the evolution of how these technologies are actually being acquired, the procurement processes.
Okay.
And finally, we'll examine the significant rise in adoption of dedicated AI applications, the section on application usage, or as they call it, the rise of the app.
Right. And it's vital to set the stage by understanding the context for this report. It's an update from a similar assessment conducted just over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the authors felt compelled to do a significant update so quickly, and that they explicitly state the landscape has evolved significantly beyond our expectations in that short time. It really underscores just how incredibly dynamic this market structure is. It's not just moving, it's accelerating.
Definitely accelerate.
What looked like promising experiments even a short time ago are rapidly transitioning into core, fundamental business functions today.
It truly is a crucial context to keep in mind. It means that strategies or assumptions based on observations, even from last year, might already be outdated.
For sure.
You absolutely have to stay on top of this constant, rapid evolution to make informed decisions, whether you're, building AI, buying it, or trying to deploy it within your organization.
Okay, with that backdrop of rapid change in mind, let's jump into the first big theme from the report, which directly addresses the financial commitment enterprises are making. Budgets.
Right.
And the headline finding here is pretty unequivocal.
Yeah.
AI spend blew past already high expectations and is definitely here to stay as a major and growing cost center.
Yeah. The first point in the report really hammers this home immediately. Budgets for AI, specifically LLMs, they're not just bigger than anticipated. They've grown ahead of the already ambitious forecasts enterprises had laid out just a year ago. And there are really no signs that this spending growth is leveling off.
This feels like one of the most striking pieces of data right at the outset. It's not just hitting targets, it's exceeding them significantly.
The data they gathered provides concrete evidence of this continued strong growth. Enterprise leaders surveyed and interviewed for the report stated that they expect an average of approximately 75% growth in their LLM spend over the next year.
75%.
Wow. Think about that number, 75%. That's not like a marginal increase. It indicates a sustained and substantial acceleration in investment.
It really puts the scale into perspective. And to make that abstract statistic tangible, the report includes a quote from a CIO that is absolutely wild and truly captures the pace of acceleration.
Oh, yeah, that quote.
They were quoted directly saying, "What I spent in 2023, I now spend in a week."
That statement alone just encapsulates the dramatic scale of change happening within some organizations. I mean, what they budgeted and consumed over an entire 12-month period.
Right.
In 2023, they are now consuming in just 7 days. That doesn't just show growth, it represents a step function change, an almost exponential increase in their actual usage and the corresponding expenditure on AI models.
Yeah.
It highlights that for some early movers, AI has gone from, a project to a fundamental high-volume part of their operations in a very, very short time.
So the natural question is, why is this explosive spending growth happening? What are the drivers behind it? The report points to a few key reasons. Partially, it's simply that enterprises are discovering more and more relevant internal use cases for AI. They're moving beyond just initial tests and finding practical, valuable ways to apply AI.
Right.
To automate tasks, improve internal processes, enhance data analysis across various departments, tasks they might not have fully anticipated or budgeted for at this scale a year ago.
Exactly. As they gain experience, they identify new pain points or inefficiencies where AI can genuinely make a difference. Think about applications like automating parts of legal document review or streamlining HR processes,
Yep.
or building sophisticated internal knowledge search engines that go far beyond traditional keyword search by understanding context and relationships. As companies build or adopt tools for these specific internal functions, the cumulative spend just increases.
And hand in hand with finding these additional use cases is the driver of increased employee adoption, right?
Oh, absolutely.
As employees across the organization are exposed to AI tools and models, and they find them genuinely useful in their day-to-day work, whether for writing assistance, data summarization, or coding, help their individual usage naturally increases. And since much this AI spend, particularly on models, is usage-based, higher employee adoption across a large workforce directly translates to significantly higher costs. It's a reflection of perceived value being delivered and consumed internally at scale.
It's a really powerful combination. Discovering new applications and then seeing those applications get used widely by the employee base.
But here's where the report gets really interesting and points to the potential for even more dramatic, perhaps exponential, future growth.
Okay.
The report states that we are only just beginning to see more customer-facing use cases emerge within enterprises, particularly among tech-forward companies.
Ah, right. Customer-facing.
And these customer-facing applications have the potential to drive spend growth that just dwarfs the internal use cases.
That's a crucial distinction because while internal use cases scale to the size of the employee base, which, can be large,
Sure.
customer-facing use cases scale to the size of the customer base. And for a large enterprise, the customer base is often orders of magnitude larger than its employee count.
Yeah, totally.
Imagine an AI not just helping internal teams, but directly interacting with millions or tens of millions of customers every single day.
The report provides a concrete example of this strategic shift. One large technology company mentioned that their focus until recently had primarily been on internal use cases for Gen AI.
Okay.
But this year, their strategic priority has shifted to customer-facing Gen AI because they recognize that the potential spend in that area will be significantly larger due to the sheer volume of customer interactions.
And the implications of that scale are just profound for budgets and infrastructure planning. Customer interaction models can be incredibly complex, requiring sophisticated natural language understanding, dialogue management, often integration with vast amounts of customer data. More importantly, they are inherently high volume.
Right.
While the per query or per interaction cost might seem small in isolation, you multiply that by the scale of a large enterprise's customer base handling millions or even billions of interactions, maybe the overall spend becomes enormous.
Yeah.
This looming shift suggests AI is moving from optimizing internal efficiency and developer productivity to becoming a core component of customer experience, sales, support, and product delivery.
That's a huge shift.
It unlocks entirely new and significantly higher levels of potential spend that weren't visible or, weren't the priority a year ago.
So point one gives us the picture of the sheer size and speed of budget growth. Point two builds on this by looking at where, within the organizational structure, this money is now being accounted for.
Right. Point 2 highlights that Gen AI spend is graduating to permanent budget lines.
This is a really important signal of market maturity and enterprise commitment, isn't it?
Definitely.
The core finding here is that spending on AI models, AI infrastructure, AI applications is steadily moving out of those less predictable, often finite buckets like innovation labs, R&D funds, or experimental project budgets.
Yeah, those experimental pots of money.
Instead, it's becoming integrated into core, ongoing IT budgets and standard business unit operating budgets.
And the report gives specific data to quantify this significant shift over the last year. Last year, innovation budgets made up a substantial quarter, or 25% of LLM spending among the surveyed enterprises.
Okay, a quarter.
This year, that number has dropped dramatically to just 7%.
Wow, from 25% to 7%.
Wow.
A more than two-thirds drop in the share of spending coming from innovation budgets in just 1 year. That's a massive reallocation.
Ew.
What does that shift fundamentally signify about how enterprises view generative AI now?
It signifies a deep and fundamental change in sentiment and the perceived status of generative AI within these organizations. It reflects the growing consensus that Gen AI is no longer something you're just experimenting with or exploring the potential of.
Right.
It's becoming viewed as essential to core business operations and competitive necessity. It's moving from a nice-to-have experimental technology to becoming part of the expected integrated cost of doing business. Much like licensing fees for core enterprise software or cloud infrastructure costs or cybersecurity expenses, it's seen as a necessary operational expense, not a speculative R&D project with an uncertain future.
That makes a lot of sense. If AI capabilities are becoming integral to how specific products function, how internal departments operate efficiently, or how new features are delivered,
Yeah.
then its cost naturally belongs within the budgets of those product teams or business units integrated into their cost structure.
Exactly.
The report includes a quote from a CTO who observes this exact trend happening. Quote, "More of our products are adding AI enablement, so our spending growth will rise across all of these products."
That quote perfectly illustrates how AI is transitioning from being like a standalone project cost to becoming a feature embedded within existing products and services.
Right.
When AI is enabling a specific product function, maybe intelligent search within a software product, or AI-powered analytics within a service, offering the costs associated with that AI enablement, model usage, inference costs, etc., are naturally baked into the product's development, delivery, and operational budgets. Its cost becomes kind of inseparable from the product's overall cost of goods sold or operating expenses, residing within the P&L of that specific product line.
And the report speculates, quite reasonably, that this shift towards integrating AI costs into core business unit and product budgets will likely only accelerate.
Seems likely, yeah.
As AI capabilities become more standard features that customers expect, and as AI-powered processes become standard operating procedure internally, their associated costs will naturally reside within the budgets of the teams responsible for delivering those features or maintaining those operational processes.
And the implications of AI costs being baked directly into product P&Ls or departmental operating budgets are significant. It means that the value proposition of the AI enablement must be clear, direct, and measurable within that specific product or departmental context.
Right, the justification changes.
Exactly. AI spending decisions in these core budgets are now subject to the same rigorous ROI analysis, justification, and performance tracking as any other core product development cost or operational expense. It's moving away from the sometimes looser justification models acceptable within innovation or R&D budgets. It's a sign that AI is being held to the same financial accountability as established technology investments.
So zooming out for a moment, why is this fundamental shift important for you, the listener? If you are selling AI solutions to enterprises, understanding this transition is absolutely critical. It means you need to shift your sales and marketing efforts. You need to target not just innovation teams, but increasingly core IT departments, heads of specific business units, and product managers who now have budget allocated for AI enablement.
Right.
The money is increasingly there, but it's in different, more traditional pockets, requiring a different sales approach focused on integrating into core workflows and delivering measurable ROI within specific business functions.
And if you are managing budgets within an enterprise, this means you need to proactively plan for this accelerated growth in AI spend and understand that it's no longer an extra or experimental cost. It's rapidly becoming fundamental to your operational cost structure and your product cost structures. It changes where the money is located within the organization and fundamentally changes how purchasing decisions for AI are being made. They're becoming more integrated into standard financial planning and operational budgeting processes, requiring clearer ROI justification linked to core business outcomes.
It's a clear and undeniable signal of AI's transition from a nascent experimental technology to a core strategic enterprise capability with dedicated growing budget lines.
Precisely. Couldn't have said it better.
Okay, moving from how much is being spent and where that money sits within the organization, let's shift gears and dive into the technology itself specifically, the AI models that are powering these applications.
Right.
The report has some fascinating insights here about the current and evolving model landscape.
Yeah, this is Section 2 models, and the report identifies three primary leaders emerging in the space, highlighting that differentiated performance by use case is driving increasing model diversification within enterprises.
Okay, so point 3 within this section is a significant observation. The multi-model world is here to stay, and the primary driver for this is model differentiation based on specific use cases, not a simple trend towards commoditization.
That's a crucial point that might surprise some people who expected the model market to quickly consolidate or for models to become, indistinguishable.
Right.
The core finding here is the opposite. Having multiple LLMs deployed in production use cases within a single enterprise has become the absolute norm. It's no longer an edge case. It's standard practice for sophisticated AI adopters.
And the data from the survey backs up this trend, showing it's accelerating. The report states that 37% of the surveyed respondents are now actively using 5 or more models within their organization,
5 or more.
a noticeable increase from 29% just a year ago. That shows a clear trajectory towards greater model diversity, not less.
And the analysis in the report points to the primary underlying driver for this multi-model strategy, and it's really important to understand this. While a desire to avoid vendor lock-in is certainly a factor, enterprises are wary of becoming solely reliant on a single provider in such a new and dynamic market.
Sure, that makes sense.
The report emphasizes that the most pronounced reason for this multi-model approach is model differentiation by use case.
So it's not just about having options, it's about picking the right tool for the specific job, like really getting specific.
Exactly. Despite the fact that on general-purpose evaluations, many models might appear to have comparable headline scores, the report makes it clear based on enterprise usage patterns that the model layer for specific enterprise tasks has not become commoditized.
Interesting.
Different models genuinely perform better or worse depending on the exact nature of the task they are given. This nuanced performance difference is really driving the need for multiple models.
Okay, let's delve into how they differentiate then. Can you give us some specific examples from the source material that illustrate this performance difference by use case?
Yeah, the report provides several illuminating examples. It's become widely noted, for instance, that Anthropic's models often excel in coding-related tasks.
Right, we hear that a lot.
But the report adds a layer of nuance here. Based on user feedback, even within the broad domain of coding, there's differentiation. Some users reported that Claude performs better for fine-grained code completion, like an AI assistant finishing lines of code as you're typing them in an IDE.
Gotcha. Autocomplete style.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they found that Google's Gemini models were stronger in higher-level system design and architecture tasks, helping with planning out code structure or system components.
Huh. That's fascinating. So you might use one model to help you write the next few lines of code efficiently, and a different model entirely to help you brainstorm or validate the overall structure of a new software module or system.
Precisely, that's the kind of specialization they're seeing. The report also includes an observation from a customer regarding performance differences, specifically in text-based applications. They found that Anthropic models were a bit better at writing tasks, excelling in areas like language fluency, generating creative content, or assisting with brainstorming ideas.
Right.
In contrast, they found that OpenAI models were better for more complex question-answering tasks that might involve synthesizing information from multiple sources, providing detailed explanations, or tackling nuanced queries requiring deeper analysis.
That implies different strengths suitable for different applications. One might be great for marketing content generation or creative writing assistance, while the other is better suited for sophisticated customer support chatbots or internal knowledge retrieval systems.
That seems to be the observed pattern driving selection. These real-world, use case-specific performance differences have made it standard practice for enterprises to use multiple models, carefully selecting the best one for the particular task at hand based on empirical performance testing. The report expects this multi-model strategy to continue and even deepen as companies continue to build specialized applications primarily for optimal performance across diverse functions, while also wanting to maintain flexibility and avoid being locked into a single vendor.
So for you, the listener, this means that if you're a developer working with AI, you'll likely need to be familiar with the APIs, strengths, and weaknesses of several different models. It's not about becoming an expert in just one.
Yeah, definitely broaden your toolkit.
And if you're a buyer, it means model selection isn't just about picking the best model in a general benchmark. It's about conducting rigorous, use case-specific evaluations to find the model that performs best for the exact task you need it to do. This requires moving beyond headline numbers and getting into the specifics of performance testing.
It adds a layer of complexity to the development and operational side. For sure, managing integrations with different APIs, handling potential variations in output formats, monitoring performance across multiple model types.
Yeah, I bet.
But it's a complexity enterprises are embracing in the pursuit of optimal results for their diverse AI applications.
Building on the idea of multiple models, point 4 in the report gives us a picture of the overall landscape and identifies which players are currently leading in terms of enterprise adoption.
Right. Point 4 states that the model landscape is crowded, with many models available and being tested, but clear leadership is emerging among a few key providers.
The core finding is that while various models are being used across experimental projects and increasingly production deployments, a few players have definitively taken the lead in terms of overall adoption and market share within the enterprise segment.
Yes, the report indicates that OpenAI has maintained overall market share leadership. However, Google and Anthropic have made very considerable strides over the last year and are rapidly gaining ground.
Okay.
They also note an important nuance. Market share differs depending on the scale of the enterprise, with significantly more open source model adoption occurring specifically at larger enterprises.
Ah, interesting. Why is that?
This is typically driven by the critical need for on-premise or self-hosted solutions for strict data security and compliance considerations in large, often regulated organizations.
Okay, that makes sense. Keeping data in-house.
Exactly.
Okay, let's double-click into the leaders based on what the report observed. First, what did they find about OpenAI's position?
OpenAI users in the enterprise are utilizing a broad suite of their models across different capabilities. GPT-4o is specifically noted as the model that is most widely deployed to production use cases among their customers.
Okay.
Beyond that, their newer reasoning-focused models like OpenAI o3 are generating significant interest and seeing early traction as enterprises look to integrate more complex, multi-step AI capabilities into their workflows.
The report highlights something particularly interesting about OpenAI's non-frontier models, which seems unique. Can you remind me of that?
Yeah, this is a key data point distinguishing OpenAI from some competitors, as noted in the report. OpenAI's non-frontier models, meaning they're slightly older, perhaps less powerful or smaller models compared to their absolute bleeding-edge offerings,
Sure.
are being adopted at much higher rates for production workloads than the non-frontier models offered by other vendors.
Huh.
The report provides this specific statistic. A striking 67% of OpenAI users surveyed had deployed these non-frontier models in production, compared to just 41% for Google's non-frontier models and a much lower 27% for Anthropic's.
That's a significant difference in how their older models are being utilized. What does that suggest about OpenAI's ecosystem or model strategy? Why are people using their older stuff more?
Well, it suggests a few things. It could indicate that OpenAI's broader portfolio, including slightly older versions, offers a level of reliability, usability, or maybe ecosystem integration that makes them trustworthy for a wider range of production use cases, even when the absolute latest frontier performance isn't strictly necessary. It might also suggest that for many tasks, the performance of these non-frontier models is already good enough for enterprise needs, or perhaps that OpenAI's overall brand trust extends broadly across their model family.
Right.
Meanwhile, it seems Google and Anthropic are often gaining adoption primarily through the compelling performance of their newest frontier models, like Gemini 2.51.5 and Claude 33.5.
Okay, how about Google's trajectory according to the report? You said they made strides.
Yeah, Google has shown a very strong rise in adoption over the last year, and this increase has been particularly pronounced specifically within large enterprises.
Okay, targeting the big guys.
Right. The report attributes this significant growth partly to their ability to leverage their deep existing relationships with Google Cloud Platform, GCP, and the inherent brand trust that comes with a mega cap technology company that is already a fundamental IT provider for many large organizations.
Sure, existing footprint helps.
Definitely. Gemini models have long been recognized for features like potentially best-in-class context windows, but the report notes that the overall performance of the Gemini 2.5 model specifically was key in effectively vaulting them into true frontier model status, making them competitive on raw capability with the top models from other labs.
And you mentioned earlier that their performance to cost ratio was highlighted as a crucial factor.
Absolutely. The report specifically highlights Google's compelling performance-to-cost ratio as a factor that may give them strong staying power and drive continued adoption. They provide a very specific, illustrative example comparing models that are often considered to have somewhat comparable levels of intelligence for certain tasks. Google's Gemini 2.5 Flash model costs just 26 cents per million tokens,
26 cents.
while OpenAI's GPT 4.1 Mini costs 70 cents per million tokens.
Wow, that is a substantial price difference when you consider the volume of tokens a large enterprise might process daily or weekly, like nearly 3 times cheaper.
It is indeed. For enterprises running millions or even billions of tokens through their AI applications, particularly for high-volume tasks where that level of performance is sufficient, that cost difference becomes a major factor in the total cost of ownership and is a significant driver of adoption.
Yeah, cost always matters.
Cost efficiency is becoming increasingly important, and Google appears to be positioning strongly on that front with certain models.
And what did the report say about Anthropic's position? Where are they seeing traction?
Anthropic has seen the highest adoption rate among the most tech-forward companies surveyed, particularly within the software industry and among startups, companies that are often earlier adopters of cutting-edge technology.
Okay, the early adopters.
The report reiterates their established strength in specific use cases, highlighting their model's excellence, most notably in code generation and comprehension tasks. As a direct result of this use case-specific leadership, they are noted as powering some of the fastest-growing and most hype AI coding applications on the market right now.
So, their success in code is acting as a wedge into the broader enterprise market, getting them noticed.
Yes, the report indicates that this deep expertise and use case level leadership in areas like code generation has gained significant attention even in more traditional enterprises. Tech-forward leaders within those companies are actively evaluating model performance specifically for engineering and coding tasks. And they are frequently selecting Anthropic models for these mission-critical developer workflows. This focused strength has been a boon to Anthropic's revenue, powering significant growth and giving them the scale and reputation that is increasingly valued by more traditional large enterprises as well, allowing them to gain traction beyond their initial base of software companies.
What about the open source models like Llama and Mistral? Where do they fit into this picture?
The report notes that adoption of open source models tended to be noticeably higher at larger enterprises compared to smaller companies. As we touched upon earlier, this is typically driven by the strong preference among large, established organizations for on-premise or self-hosted solutions.
Right, the data security angle again.
Absolutely crucial for meeting stringent data security, compliance, and regulatory considerations that are common in sectors like finance, healthcare, or government. Open source models allow these enterprises to bring the model entirely inside their own infrastructure perimeter.
And it also gives them flexibility, right? For tweaking things.
Exactly. Adopting open source also provides these large enterprises with the ability to fine-tune these models extensively for their very specific internal enterprise use cases and proprietary data sets. This level of customization might not be possible or cost-effective with closed-source models for certain tasks, especially those requiring deep domain adaptation to unique corporate data or processes.
And finally, the market is still dynamic, right? The report mentions newer players entering the fray. It's not just these 3.
Yes. The report notes that the market share and adoption landscape is not static. They specifically mention newer model providers like xAI with models such as Grok 3 Mini are already seeing strong interest and early testing out of the gate within enterprises. The report notes that this kind of rapid early evaluation and testing behavior from enterprises is reminiscent of what they saw just last year with the then new models entering the market.
Right.
Serving as a reminder that the model market share is still fluid and new players with compelling capabilities can quickly gain traction and carve out a niche.
So understanding these specific strengths, the nuances in market shares across different enterprise types, and the key factors driving adoption performance for specific use cases, cost efficiency, leveraging existing relationships, use case specialization, and deployment options is really vital information, whether you're trying to choose the right model for your needs or trying to position your model offering effectively in the market.
It's a landscape that really rewards understanding the details beyond just the headline model names. It's not a generic competition. It's segmented by capability, cost, and deployment preference.
Building on the significance of the cost factor you just highlighted with Google, point 5 directly addresses how price is influencing model adoption, particularly for non-cutting-edge models.
Right. Point 5 focuses on the observation that the closed source price-to-performance ratio has become much more compelling, particularly for non-frontier models.
We've touched on the fact that model costs have been coming down dramatically over the past year or so. The report mentions conversations indicating roughly an order of magnitude cost reduction every 12 months for comparable levels of capability.
Yeah, crazy drops.
Against that backdrop of falling costs, this report highlights a specific trend. The price-to-performance ratio for smaller and medium-sized closed-source models has become significantly more compelling to enterprises.
The report specifically names xAI's Grok 3 Mini and Google's Gemini 2.5 Flash as examples of models currently leading on this front, offering very attractive performance relative to their cost.
And what's a direct result of this improved price-to-performance for these specific models? Are companies switching?
The consequence noted in the report is that in an increasing number of cases, customers are more frequently opting for these compelling closed-source models. This isn't just because of price alone, but because of the improved price to performance combined with other ecosystem benefits,
Oh, okay.
such as ease of use, managed hosting options, or integration into existing vendor relationships.
The report includes a couple of customer quotes that really underscore how influential cost and ecosystem factors are becoming. One customer was quoted saying, "The pricing has gotten appealing and we're already embedded with Google. We use everything from G Suite to databases, and their enterprise expertise is attractive."
Mm-hmm. Sticks with what they know.
And another leader put it even more bluntly and succinctly, "Gemini is cheap."
Can't argue with that. Those quotes clearly demonstrate that for certain tasks, where the absolute bleeding-edge performance of a frontier model isn't strictly necessary, where good enough performance is sufficient cost, is rapidly becoming a dominant or even the primary factor in model selection. When multiple models can achieve the required accuracy or output quality, the decision often comes down to which one is most economical at scale, especially when coupled with the benefits of an existing trusted vendor relationship and ecosystem. Closed source options are now effectively competing on price for these significant workloads.
This is a key insight for anyone managing AI spend within an organization. It highlights that you don't necessarily need to pay top dollar or deploy the largest, most powerful model for every single task.
Right, optimize your spend.
Identifying tasks where a less expensive but still highly performant model can achieve the desired results is crucial for optimizing your AI budget. It also puts significant pressure on all model providers to be competitive, not just on raw capability, but increasingly on their pricing structure and the overall value offered within their ecosystem.
It signifies a maturing market where efficiency and cost-effectiveness are gaining prominence as decision criteria alongside raw model performance.
Moving on, point 6 in the report talks about a notable shift in how enterprises are viewing the need for fine-tuning models. What's happening there?
Yes, point 6 indicates that fine-tuning models is viewed as less necessary for many enterprises compared to a year ago, primarily because general model capabilities have improved so much.
This might seem counterintuitive at first glance.
Yeah.
You might think that as companies use AI more deeply and with their specific proprietary data, they would need to fine-tune models more to tailor them precisely.
That was perhaps an earlier expectation or assumption in the market, but the core finding here, based on enterprise experience over the last year, is that as foundation models have become significantly more capable, meaning they possess higher general intelligence, broader knowledge, and critically, much longer context windows fine-tuning is seen as less critical to achieving strong application-specific performance for a wide range of use cases.
So what are companies doing instead to get models to perform well on their specific tasks and data? If not fine-tuning, then what?
The report highlights the preferred alternative that has emerged. Companies have found that sophisticated prompt engineering can often drive similar or even better results than traditional fine-tuning, and crucially, usually at a much lower cost and with significantly less engineering effort.
Can you elaborate on the mechanism behind that shift, based on what the report details? How does prompting replace fine-tuning?
Yeah, the report includes a particularly insightful observation from an enterprise leader that perfectly captures this shift in approach. They were quoted saying, "Instead of taking the training data and parameter-efficient fine-tuning, a common method of fine-tuning, you just dump it into a long context and get almost equivalent results."
Just dump it into a long context.
Right. What this means in practice is that with the advent of models that can handle very long context windows, processing tens or hundreds of thousands of tokens at once.
Yeah, those context windows are getting huge.
Yeah. Exactly. You can provide the model with large amounts of relevant data, proprietary documents, specific examples of desired input-output pairs, and detailed instructions directly within the prompt itself. The model can then access and reference this information within its working memory to generate the desired output,
Ah, yeah.
effectively performing a task that might have previously required fine-tuning to teach it about that specific domain, data format, or interaction style. This approach of dumping into a long context is fundamentally simpler, faster, and significantly cheaper than the complex process of data preparation, model training runs, and infrastructure management required for traditional fine-tuning.
So the benefit isn't just cost savings, it also offers greater flexibility and agility.
Yeah.
Seems like a big win.
Absolutely. This move away from relying heavily on fine-tuning offers significant advantages, particularly in helping companies avoid model lock-in.
Right.
Traditional fine-tuned models represent a substantial upfront investment in terms of gathering and preparing data, plus the engineering time and compute cost required for the training process. They are also tightly coupled to the specific architecture of the foundational model they were trained on, making it difficult and costly to switch to a different model family later. Prompts, on the other hand, while requiring skill to craft effectively, are much more easily ported and adapted from one model provider's API to another's.
And why is that portability and flexibility vital right now in this specific market phase? Why does that matter so much?
Because models are improving so rapidly and new, more capable or cost-effective options are emerging constantly. Companies want the flexibility to quickly evaluate and switch to the latest, most capable, or most cost-efficient model that comes along, without being burdened by having to completely redo a massive fine-tuning project every time they want to make a change. This ease of portability, facilitated by the prompt engineering approach and long context windows, allows them to stay on the leading edge or optimize costs much more effectively without incurring prohibitive migration hurdles.
But the report is careful to acknowledge that fine-tuning isn't completely obsolete. There are still specific scenarios where it's used, right? It's not totally gone.
That's correct. The report stresses that companies with truly hyper-specific use cases are still finding value in fine-tuning models. They provide the example of one streaming service that fine-tunes open-source models specifically for query augmentation in video search.
Okay.
They note this is a case where you need more domain adaptation.
Why would that kind of deep domain adaptation still require fine-tuning when other tasks can be handled by prompting? What's different there?
Domain adaptation, especially for very niche or internal corporate domains, often involves teaching the model the specific vocabulary, proprietary concepts, relationships, and implicit understanding unique to a particular industry, dataset, or internal process that simply aren't well represented in its vast general training data. While long context windows can certainly help by providing relevant documents for tasks requiring deep, implicit fluency and understanding of a very narrow, specialized domain, like understanding the nuances of how users search for specific types of video content using internal terminology or metadata.
Gotcha.
Fine-tuning can still provide a level of performance and accuracy edge that even very clever prompting alone can't reliably achieve across every possible user query or scenario. It's about embedding that domain knowledge more deeply into the model itself.
And they even mentioned the possibility of fine-tuning, seeing a resurgence in the future. It might come back.
Yes, the report notes that we might see a rise in fine-tuning again down the line, particularly if newer, more advanced methods, like reinforcement fine-tuning, become more widely adopted and easier to implement beyond leading research labs and into standard enterprise practice.
Okay.
But for the current state of enterprise AI adoption, for the vast majority of use cases, the ROI on traditional fine-tuning is perceived as lower than it was a year ago, pushing enterprises towards leveraging the power of foundation models via sophisticated prompt engineering,
Right.
or opting for open source models only in highly cost-sensitive scenarios where fine-tuning might still be considered necessary for unique performance needs.
So for developers and buyers in this space, this fundamentally changes the approach to customizing model behavior. The focus is shifting from complex model training pipelines towards mastering the art and science of prompt design, leveraging the power of increasingly long context windows, and selecting models with strong base capabilities and favorable pricing.
It definitely elevates prompt engineering from like a trick to a core enterprise AI skill.
Finally, within the model section, point 7 looks ahead to a potential new ways of capabilities hitting the enterprise. What's next?
Point 7 highlights that enterprises are expressing significant optimism about the potential of reasoning models and are poised to scale their usage quickly as these models become more available and reliable.
What exactly are reasoning models in the context the report discusses them? How are they different?
The report explains that reasoning models represent an evolution in LLM capability. They are designed to enable models to complete more complex, multi-step tasks more accurately than previous generations.
Okay.
They can follow intricate logic chains, synthesize information from disparate sources more effectively, make nuanced inferences, plan sequences of actions, and generally perform tasks that require a deeper level of cognitive processing than simple pattern matching or information retrieval.
Right.
This capability significantly expands the range of use cases that LLMs can effectively tackle within the enterprise.
And what's the sentiment towards these models within the enterprises surveyed right now? Are they excited, cautious?
The report finds that while enterprises are still relatively early in their hands-on testing of these advanced reasoning models, and relatively few have deployed them into widespread production use yet,
Mm-hmm.
companies are expressing very significant optimism about their potential to unlock new levels of AI capability.
The report includes a quote from an executive that really captures this forward-looking optimism tempered by the current reality of early testing.
Yes, one executive interviewed captured the sentiment well. Reasoning models allow us to solve newer, more complex use cases, so I anticipate a big jump in our usage. But we're still early in testing today.
Right. Excitement, but still testing.
This clearly shows the excitement within enterprises about the potential possibilities that these models unlock, even if the phase of widespread deployment and realizing that potential is still just beginning.
Who is seeing early traction with enterprises adopting these more advanced capabilities? Which providers are leading here?
Among the early enterprise adopters who are already deploying reasoning models, the report notes that OpenAI's reasoning models, specifically their O3 models, have seen the greatest traction.
Okay, OpenAI again?
They provide the data point. 23% of the enterprises surveyed were already using OpenAI's O3 model in production environments. They contrast this with DeepSeek, another model noted for its reasoning capabilities, which, despite some industry buzz, only saw 3% adoption among the enterprises in their survey, though it had higher adoption among startups.
That's a notable difference in early enterprise adoption. What are the potential implications if this optimism about reasoning models translates into widespread deployment across enterprises? What changes?
It could fundamentally change the scope of problems that AI can solve within the enterprise. Tasks that previously required complex manual processes, highly sophisticated rule-based systems, or just weren't feasible for automation, could become viable AI use cases.
Like what, for example?
Think about automating complex legal contract analysis requiring multiple steps of review and inference, or providing nuanced diagnostic support in healthcare by synthesizing information from various patient records and research,
Wow.
or enabling sophisticated multi-step supply chain optimization by planning across numerous variables. These models could unlock entirely new levels of automation, intelligence, and decision support within workflows that were simply too complex or required too much intricate logic for earlier generations of LLMs.
So for anyone looking to the future of enterprise AI capabilities or developing AI products, understanding the potential and current limitations of reasoning models is key to anticipating the next wave of AI adoption and impact within businesses.
It's definitely where many see the frontier of enterprise AI capability expanding next.
Okay, we've covered the shifts in budgets and the evolving landscape of AI models. Let's move on to the third major section of the report, which focuses on the practical realities of how companies are actually acquiring this technology procurement.
Right. This section highlights that enterprise AI buying is rapidly adopting the rigor and formal processes typically associated with traditional enterprise software buying.
Point 8 makes this very clear. The buying process for models, and increasingly for AI applications, is starting to resemble traditional enterprise software procurement, complete with disciplined evaluation frameworks, checklists, and significant price sensitivity.
This is another strong indicator that the enterprise AI market is maturing beyond an early experimental phase. The core finding is that companies are now approaching AI model and application selection with much more disciplined evaluation frameworks than perhaps was the case initially.
Right.
It's not just a quick technical proof of concept anymore, it's a formal procurement process.
What specific factors are gaining prominence in these evaluation frameworks, sitting alongside core technical considerations like accuracy and reliability? What else matters now?
The report notes that factors such as security, which was heavily emphasized and frequently brought up in their interviews with enterprise leaders, and cost, have gained significant ground.
Security and cost. Okay.
In fact, the report states that for many tasks, these factors are starting to outweigh raw overall accuracy and reliability as the primary decision criteria.
And the fundamental reason driving this shift in evaluation criteria. Why the change?
The report explains that this shift underscores the increased trust enterprises now have in the baseline performance of multiple models. For many common or standard tasks, several models available on the market are now considered good enough or perform within an acceptable range in terms of accuracy.
Okay, if several models work, other things become important.
Exactly. When performance is sufficiently commoditized for a given task, the decision naturally shifts to other critical enterprise-level considerations like security. Can we trust this model provider and their infrastructure with our sensitive data? And cost. Which model provides the required level of performance most economically at our projected scale?
The quote from a leader in the report perfectly encapsulates this changing dynamic. For most tasks, all the models perform well enough now, so pricing has become a much more important factor.
That succinct statement speaks volumes about the current competitive landscape for models. It's no longer just a race to achieve the absolute highest score on a general benchmark.
Right.
For a significant portion of enterprise use cases, it's a race to be the most secure, the most cost-effective, or the best performing specifically for a defined, often narrow use case, and increasingly, cost is winning out when baseline performance is met.
And this increasing rigor and focus on cost ties back to the sophistication we discussed earlier about matching models to specific use cases, right? It's all connected.
Exactly. The report reiterates the increased sophistication enterprises are developing in this matching process, and this directly impacts procurement. They're becoming adept at identifying when to opt for leading-edge, potentially more expensive models with strong brand recognition, reserving those for highly visible or performance-critical applications where reliability and absolute capability are paramount. In contrast, for simpler internal tasks or those where errors are less costly, the report explicitly states that model choice is often coming down purely to cost.
Just pure cost.
This level of discernment and structured evaluation directly mirrors mature traditional software buying practices.
The report even mentions how the key purchasing criteria, or KPCs for LLMs, have evolved over time, reflecting this move towards more rigorous, traditional software-style evaluation.
It's a clear signal to AI vendors. Be prepared for formal procurement processes, thorough security reviews, detailed cost analysis, and specific use case performance testing tailored to the enterprise's needs, not just general model evaluations.
Yeah, the game has changed.
And for buyers, it means you can increasingly leverage your existing, well-understood procurement frameworks, checklists, and evaluation processes for AI model and application selection.
Point 9 looks specifically at where these models are actually deployed and hosted. What are the trends there?
Point 9 discusses that hosting preferences still vary widely among enterprises, though there's been a significant increase in trust for hosting directly with model providers over the last year.
So what are the different hosting preferences the report observed among the surveyed enterprises? Where are they running this stuff?
Well, while there's still a significant degree of preference for leveraging existing relationships with major cloud providers, which makes a lot of sense, given that cloud providers are already trusted partners for infrastructure and other software purchases.
Sure.
The report notes that more enterprises are now hosting either directly with the model providers themselves, like OpenAI or Anthropic, or via specialized platforms designed for AI deployments, such as Databricks. This is particularly true when the desired model isn't easily available or performant on their primary cloud provider's marketplace.
And the notable shift mentioned here is that trust in going direct with the model providers like OpenAI and Anthropic
Yeah.
has grown significantly compared to observations from just a year ago. People trust them more now.
Yes, that's highlighted as a significant development. Last year, many enterprises were quite cautious about going direct with relatively newer model providers. They often preferred accessing models via a large, established cloud provider whenever possible. Sometimes even using a non-primary cloud provider if that's where their model of choice was best hosted. This year, the report indicates a much higher willingness and trust in establishing direct relationships with the model labs themselves.
What's the primary reasoning behind this increased trust and the growing preference for going direct? Why bypass the cloud providers?
The report provides the crucial insight into the motivation. Enterprise leaders stated that they want direct access to the latest model with the best performance as soon as it's available. Early access previews are important too.
Speed of the latest tech.
Exactly. In this incredibly fast-moving field where model capabilities are evolving rapidly, being able to access the absolute cutting edge immediately upon release is paramount for some enterprises who want to build the most performant applications.
Right.
Going direct often bypasses potential delays in model rollout or feature availability that might occur when models are accessed solely through a third-party cloud marketplace that needs to integrate and validate the new versions.
This trend towards direct relationships with model providers has significant implications for the traditional cloud providers, doesn't it? It challenges their role.
It absolutely does. It poses a direct challenge to the traditional role of cloud providers as the mandatory gateway for all AI model consumption. For model providers, building robust infrastructure and earning enterprise trust for direct hosting is clearly paying off and becoming a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
For cloud providers, they need to ensure their marketplaces offer competitive, timely, and reliable access to the most desired cutting-edge models, potentially even partnering more deeply with model labs to prevent customers from bypassing their platform entirely for AI workloads.
Right.
And for buyers, it means they have more flexibility in deciding how they want to access, deploy, and manage their models, choosing the method that best aligns with their needs for timeliness, performance, cost, and direct support from the model developer.
Now, point 10 in the report discusses something that seems to go against the grain of what many enterprises were aiming for just a year ago regarding flexibility.
Yes. Point 10 states that switching costs for AI solutions are rising as enterprises tackle more complex tasks with AI.
Right, because my understanding was that in the early days, there was a lot of focus on designing AI applications to be model agnostic, making it easy to swap out one model for another, keeping switching costs low and preserving flexibility. Wasn't that the goal?
That was indeed a strong sentiment and design goal earlier in the cycle, and it worked reasonably well for simple one-shot use cases tasks where you send a single prompt or data point to the model and get a single response back, and the outcome is relatively easy to evaluate in isolation.
Oh, okay.
For those kinds of tasks where the AI's role is more of a simple function call, models could often be treated as interchangeable components, making them easy come, easy go, as some put it.
But the report indicates that this ease of switching is changing, particularly with the rise of something called agentic workflows. What's going on there?
Exactly. The core finding here is that the increasing prevalence and sophistication of agentic workflows has started making it more difficult and costly for enterprises to switch between underlying models for certain applications.
Can you explain what agentic workflows are in this context, based on the report, and why they specifically increase switching costs? What makes them different?
Sure, agentic workflows are fundamentally more complex than simple prompt response interactions. They involve the AI model carrying out tasks that require multiple sequential steps, often involving using external tools like searching the web, calling an API, or interacting with other software.
Okay, multi-step processes.
Yeah, making decisions based on intermediate results or feedback, and chaining together different actions or reasoning steps to achieve a larger, often complex, goal. Think of an AI agent that doesn't just answer a question about a document, but is tasked with researching a topic, drafting a report based on that research, getting feedback, and then revising the report using the feedback and additional research.
That sounds much more involved than just asking a model to summarize text or write an email. A lot more moving parts.
It is significantly more involved, and the report explains why this complexity increases switching costs. Companies are investing substantial time, engineering resources, and intellectual property into building complex guardrails, sophisticated multi-step prompting sequences, and integration logic specifically tailored for these agentic workflows.
Okay.
These guardrails are necessary to ensure the workflow remains safe, reliable, and consistent across multiple steps, preventing undesirable outputs or actions. The detailed multi-part prompting guides the model through the required sequence of actions, reasoning steps, and tool uses.
And once you've made that kind of deep investment in tuning this complex system for a specific model,
Yeah.
you're kind of stuck.
Well, once that significant investment in building, testing, and refining the guardrails and prompting for a complex agentic workflow around a specific model is made, companies become much more hesitant to switch to other models. The primary fear is that the precisely tuned sequence of steps, the complex multi-part prompting that works with Model A, and the carefully built guardrails won't produce reliable or replicable results with Model B without substantial rework. They correctly anticipate needing to invest a significant amount of engineering time to re-engineer, test, and revalidate the entire complex workflow to ensure the same level of reliability, safety, and performance with a different underlying model.
The report includes a particularly illustrative quote from a leader that really paints a vivid picture of this engineering challenge. Can you share that?
Yes, a leader interviewed for the report detailed the complexity, stating, "All the prompts have been tuned for OpenAI. Each one of them has their own set of instructions and prompts and details. How LLMs get instructions to do agentic processing, it takes lots of pages of instruction. Also, quality assurance of agents is not super easy, so changing models is now a task that can take a lot of engineering time."
Lots of pages of instruction. That detail really drives home the depth of the engineering effort required to build and robustly tune these complex agentic systems. It's far more than a simple one-line prompt.
It absolutely is. And the point about the difficulty of quality assurance, QA for agents, adds another layer of complexity. When you change the underlying model in a multi-step agentic workflow, you can't just test the final output.
Right.
You often have to verify that every single intermediate step performs correctly, that the tools are used appropriately, and that the overall outcome is reliable and safe across a wide range of inputs and scenarios. This is a far more involved and time-consuming QA process than simply checking a single generated response from a simple prompt. This substantial engineering and QA effort represents a significant hurdle to switching models for these advanced applications.
So for vendors who are building these complex agentic solutions on top of specific foundation models, this implies potentially much stickier customers, as the effort required for an enterprise to migrate away increases substantially.
Potential lock-in.
And for enterprises, evaluating the potential difficulty and cost of switching models down the line becomes a much larger and more critical part of the procurement process for these more complex AI systems. You gain the powerful capabilities of agentic AI, but potentially at the cost of some of the flexibility you might have had with simpler AI applications.
It absolutely forces a more strategic, long-term view on your initial model choice when you're building out complex, multi-step AI solutions. The initial investment in engineering around a specific model becomes a significant factor.
The final point in the procurement section, point 11, looked at how enterprises are using external resources and benchmarks to help them navigate what is becoming a very crowded model market. How are they sorting through all the options?
Well, point 11 notes that enterprises are increasingly referencing external benchmarks and evaluations as quasi-magic quadrants to use as an initial filter for model selection.
What does the report mean by drawing an analogy between external AI benchmarks and traditional magic quadrants or Gartner-like filters? How does that work?
It's using an analogy that enterprises are very familiar with from the world of traditional enterprise software procurement. For years, companies have relied on reports and evaluations from analyst firms like Gartner or Forrester,
Right.
whose reports often include Magic Quadrant or wave graphics to help them understand complex vendor landscapes, identify potential solutions, and get an initial sense of market positioning and perceived strengths or weaknesses. As the number of available LLMs and AI platforms proliferates, these external AI benchmarks and evaluations are starting to function in a similar way.
Okay.
They provide a practical, somewhat structured filter to help procurement teams and technical leaders initially sort through the many options available.
The report gives an example of such a benchmark that's being referenced.
Yes, they mention sources like LM Arena as examples of external benchmarks and evaluations that companies are increasingly referencing as a starting point in their model evaluation process.
But it's important, as the report stresses, that these external benchmarks are just a filter. not the sole basis for a final decision, right? You can't just rely on the leaderboard.
Absolutely. This is a crucial nuance that the report emphasizes strongly. While these external benchmarks are helpful for providing an initial overview and filtering down the list of potential models, they are explicitly stated as not being the only or even primary basis for making the final decision. Internal benchmarks, assessing performance on the enterprise's own specific tasks, golden data sets, curated data sets representing the enterprise's critical internal use cases and data types, and developer feedback from engineers who are actually working hands-on with the models during trials.
Right, real-world testing.
These are still critical parts of assessing LLM performance more deeply and making the ultimate decision about which model to deploy. You need to see how the model performs on your specific problems with your specific data within your intended workflow.
The report shares a leader's perspective that really captures this balance between using external insights and doing internal work. What do they say?
They quoted a leader saying, "We definitely look at the external benchmarks, but you still need to assess yourself. It's hard to pick without really trialing things and getting employee feedback."
Right. Need to kick the tires yourself.
This highlights the necessity of hands-on testing, validation against internal performance standards and data sets, and crucially, getting feedback from the technical teams and future end users who will actually be working with the models day to day. External benchmarks can point you in the right direction, but they can't replace your own due diligence.
So for model providers, performing well on widely referenced external benchmarks is becoming an important requirement. It's an entry ticket or a way to get onto the shortlist.
Yeah, table stakes maybe.
But for buyers, these benchmarks offer a useful starting point to reduce the search space. But they are best used as a filter, not a replacement for a thorough internal evaluation process using your own data and tasks.
It's adding a layer of familiar, structured evaluation to a new and complex technology market, helping enterprises manage the overwhelming number of options.
All right, we've covered the shifts in enterprise AI budgets, the evolving landscape of AI models and how they're differentiated, and the increasingly rigorous procurement processes.
Okay.
The fourth and final major section of the report in our deep dive today focuses on the actual deployment and use of AI specifically, the significant rise of the app.
Yeah.
This looks at how enterprises are increasingly moving towards using dedicated, off-the-shelf AI applications.
Yes, Section 4 is titled The Rise of the App, and the report's headline here is clear. AI application growth is happening gangbusters as more enterprises decide to buy instead of build their AI solutions across a wider range of use cases.
Point 12 kicks off this section by discussing a major marked shift in how enterprises are acquiring AI capabilities, moving away from building internal tools. What's the dynamic here?
Point 12 states directly that enterprises are shifting from a build approach to a buy approach as the AI application ecosystem matures rapidly.
The core finding here is a marked and accelerating shift towards buying third-party, off-the-shelf AI applications over the last 12 months. This stands in stark contrast to the earlier phase of AI adoption, which often saw enterprises attempting to build their own internal AI applications on top of raw foundation models.
That early build phase made sense when powerful foundation models were brand new and there weren't many mature, specialized AI applications available yet that leveraged these new capabilities effectively.
Right, you had to build it yourself then.
Enterprises had to build their own tools to explore the potential, but the report identifies several key drivers behind this recent pronounced shift towards buying as the AI application ecosystem has matured dramatically.
What are those key drivers pushing companies towards buying AI apps instead of building?
Firstly, the report argues that the incremental ROI gains that come from constantly evaluating, integrating, and optimizing performance across the latest models, a dynamic process driven by the model performance and cost differentiation we discussed earlier, are often best tackled by a dedicated, specialized AI application team. That is, the vendor who focuses only on building the best possible application for a specific use case.
Right.
It's difficult for an internal enterprise team, which is typically juggling multiple priorities across different internal tools, to keep up with this pace of model evaluation and optimization compared to a focused vendor team.
So becoming an expert in building a world-class AI application that constantly stays on top of the rapidly evolving model landscape and optimizes performance for a specific task is essentially a full-time job that's hard to do on the side.
Exactly. Vendors specializing in a specific AI application category say, AI coding assistants or AI-powered customer support tools or AI legal review software can dedicate their engineering and research resources entirely to staying current with the rapidly evolving model landscape.
Mm.
They can integrate new models as they become available, benchmark and optimize performance specifically for their application's use case, manage the underlying model cost efficiently, and develop user-friendly interfaces. Internal enterprise teams often find it difficult and resource-intensive to keep pace with this rate of innovation across multiple internally developed tools.
And the report explicitly mentions that these internally developed AI tools are often difficult and costly to maintain in such a dynamic space, right? They get outdated fast.
Yes. Enterprises are finding that their internally developed AI tools quickly become outdated as newer, more capable, or more cost-effective models emerge. The effort required for constant maintenance, updating integrations, and re-optimizing performance with newer models is significant and pulls resources away from other core business initiatives.
And the report also makes the point that these internal builds frequently don't actually give the enterprise a competitive business advantage compared to buying a specialized solution. Is that right?
Right. If an internal team builds an AI tool for a relatively common business function like customer support, internal search, or developer productivity, a third-party vendor who specializes only in building the absolute best AI application for that exact function,
Mm-hmm.
who is constantly optimizing for that single use case, integrating the best available models, and incorporating user feedback across many customers, is almost certainly going to deliver a superior product in terms of features, performance, and usability.
Yeah.
Building it yourself doesn't give you a unique competitive edge in that function. Buying the best tool for that function, which leverages the best underlying AI, does.
The report expects this trend of shifting from build to buy to accelerate even further as more and more AI application categories mature. They see enterprise leaders increasingly considering third-party apps more heavily when testing new use cases as a strong leading indicator of this ongoing shift.
Yeah, it's becoming the default starting point for evaluation.
And they provide a very strong, concrete example of this trend playing out in the customer support use case.
Yeah.
What was that?
The report notes that over 90% of the surveyed enterprises stated that they were actively testing or evaluating third-party AI applications specifically for customer support.
Why 90% testing is a huge number, indicating this shift is well underway for that category. That's nearly everyone looking at buying.
It is indeed. And they give a specific illustrative example of a public fintech company that initially started down the path of building their customer support AI internally, leveraging foundation models.
Okay.
But after reviewing the landscape of third-party AI solutions on the market for customer support, they ultimately decided to stop their internal build effort and instead chose to buy a third-party application.
Wow.
This concrete example highlights the power of the maturing ecosystem and the compelling value proposition specialized vendors can offer.
Why do you think customer support is such a good candidate for an off-the-shelf AI application that drives this build-to-buy trend? What makes it different?
Well, customer support is a common, high-volume business function that exists across nearly all industries. While there are nuances for specific products or services, the core tasks answering frequently asked questions, routing inquiries, summarizing customer issues, providing relevant information from documentation are relatively standardized.
Right, lots of common ground.
This makes it a fertile ground for AI application vendors to build specialized, high-quality products that can serve a wide base of customers across different sectors. These vendors can achieve significant economies of scale and build deep, dedicated expertise in optimizing AI specifically for support interactions,
Mm-hmm.
capabilities that are hard for an individual enterprise to replicate internally across every single potential AI use case it might pursue.
The report does note one area where this build-to-buy trend hasn't played out as strongly, though. What's the exception?
Yes, they mention that this general trend towards buying third-party applications hasn't manifested quite as strongly yet in highly regulated or particularly high-risk industries such as healthcare or certain financial services.
Ah, okay. Regulation slows things down.
Right. In those sectors, data privacy, strict compliance requirements, and the need for absolute control over sensitive information often still lean enterprises towards internal builds, even if they are more costly, to maintain tighter governance and ensure regulatory adherence.
But overall, for the broader AI software market, this represents a major trend. favoring specialized AI application vendors who can offer best-in-class solutions over internal development teams for a growing number of use cases.
It indicates a maturing ecosystem where specialized AI products are delivering compelling value propositions and clear ROI compared to the effort and cost of building and maintaining custom solutions internally.
Point 13 in the report looks at a specific challenge that AI application vendors are currently facing, particularly regarding pricing models. What's the issue there?
Point 13 highlights that enterprise buyers, specifically CIOs, are struggling with and remain uncomfortable with outcome-based pricing models for AI applications, despite the hype around them.
There's been a lot of discussion in the industry about how AI might shift pricing models, potentially allowing vendors to charge based on the actual business results or outcomes the AI application delivers.
Right, like pay for performance.
Yeah, increase sales, reduce costs, or improved efficiency rather than just based on usage or licenses. But the report finds that enterprise CIOs are still uncomfortable with this model.
That's the core finding. Despite the theoretical appeal of outcome-based pricing, the report found that CIOs are currently uncomfortable with how outcome metrics are defined, how the value is measured, and how billing is structured under such models for AI applications.
What are the specific concerns that enterprise buyers raised about outcome-based pricing for AI? Why don't they like it?
The report lists the key issues they identified: a lack of clear outcomes that can be precisely mapped to specific business goals. It's often difficult to define and mutually agree upon the exact outcome, being priced in a way that is unambiguous and measurable, unpredictable costs.
Budget uncertainty.
Outcome-based pricing can lead to highly variable and difficult to forecast expenses, which is challenging for enterprise budgeting, and significant attribution challenges.
Right, proving the AI caused the outcome.
Yeah, it's hard for buyers to definitively attribute a specific positive business outcome solely and directly to the AI application when many other factors are involved in achieving that result.
So it's difficult for both parties to isolate the AI's precise contribution to the bottom line and reliably tie payment to it. Seems tricky.
Exactly. And the report notes that there was no consensus among the surveyed leaders on how AI application vendors could effectively mitigate these issues or build trust in outcome-based models. This highlights the inherent difficulty in designing and implementing outcome pricing effectively and predictably in the current AI space. AI is a relatively new technology, and precisely how it drives measurable, attributable value for complex businesses is still being figured out and quantified. Buyers are understandably cautious about potentially unpredictable charges and, as the report puts it, don't want to be left holding the bag if the promised outcomes don't materialize as expected or if other factors influence the result.
Given this widespread discomfort with outcome-based pricing, what's the clear preference that emerged from the survey data regarding how enterprises prefer to pay for AI applications? What do they want?
The report states clearly that the overwhelming preference among most CIOs surveyed is still to pay by usage for AI applications.
Okay, pay as you go, basically.
Right. This model, while potentially still variable based on activity, provides a level of predictability and transparency regarding cost drivers that enterprises are much more comfortable with. Usage-based pricing aligns well with the nature of AI model consumption, paying for tokens, compute, or API calls, and seems to be the most palatable and understandable model for enterprises right now, despite the theoretical appeal of outcome-based alternatives.
So for AI application vendors, this is absolutely critical feedback straight from the buyer's mouths. Focusing on robust, clear, and predictable usage-based pricing models might be key to unlocking enterprise adoption at scale, despite the long-term allure or potential of outcome-based models. And for buyers, understanding that this pricing model is still immature and often not preferred can inform negotiation strategies and help in selecting vendors that offer more traditional or usage-based approaches.
Yeah, usage-based pricing aligns with established practices for many cloud services and APIs, making it a more familiar and trusted model for procurement.
Point 14 in the report identifies a specific area where AI is having a dramatic and accelerated impact within enterprises right now, standing out from other use cases. Which one is really taking off?
Point 14 highlights that while AI adoption is progressing across many different areas like internal search, data analysis, and customer support, software development has seen a truly step change in adoption velocity and impact within enterprises compared to other use cases.
A step change. Okay. The report positions this acceleration in software development AI as being driven by a perfect storm of converging factors. What makes it so special?
That's the term they use, and it's apt. The confluence of factors creating this massive growth in AI adoption, specifically for software development, includes, firstly, the availability of extremely high-quality, specialized, off-the-shelf AI coding applications, like AI coding
All
assistants.
right.
Secondly, a significant increase in the capabilities of the underlying AI models themselves, specifically those tuned and optimized for code.
Hmm.
Thirdly, the fact that software development is a core function relevant for a broad set of companies and industries, not just a niche few.
Yeah, everyone needs code.
And perhaps most importantly, it offers a clear, easily quantifiable, almost no-brainer ROI use case,
Right.
directly increasing developer productivity and accelerating software delivery.
The report provides a truly striking, almost hard-to-believe example that illustrates the sheer scale of this step change in adoption within a real company.
Oh.
What was the statistic?
Yes. They quote the CTO at a high-growth SaaS company who reported a dramatic shift. Nearly 90% of their code is now AI-generated through advanced AI coding tools like Cursor and those leveraging Claude Code.
90%. That's incredible.
They contrast this with their situation just 12 months prior when they were using earlier generation tools like GitHub Copilot, and only 10–15% of their code was AI-generated.
From 10–15% to 90% in a year. That's an astounding jump in the percentage of code being generated by AI. It signals a fundamental transformation in their software development process.
It does. The report acknowledges that this specific example, achieving nearly 90% AI code generation, might represent the current bleeding edge, meaning it's not yet typical across all enterprises.
Okay, maybe not everyone's there yet.
However, they argue that this is likely a strong leading indicator for the broader enterprise market. If AI can deliver this magnitude of productivity, gain potentially orders of magnitude in acceleration or cost reduction for creating code in such a core and universal business function, like software creation,
Right.
it strongly suggests that similar dramatic transformations are likely coming to other areas of the business as AI applications and models mature for those specific domains.
This specific finding absolutely highlights the necessity for anyone involved in software development or leading engineering teams to seriously evaluate and adopt these advanced AI coding tools if they haven't already. It's no longer a marginal productivity boost. It appears to be fundamentally changing the rate of code creation.
Absolutely.
And for those in other business functions, it's a signal to watch for similar perfect storm scenarios where a combination of high-quality apps, capable models, broad applicability, and clear ROI could bring similarly disruptive killer apps to your specific domain.
It vividly demonstrates just how quickly AI can move from being a helpful assistant to a fundamental, high-leverage part of the creation process in certain fields, completely reshaping workflows and productivity metrics.
Point 15 in the report looks at an interesting dynamic driving the early growth and adoption of these AI applications within enterprises. What's fueling the fire?
Point 15 suggests that the prosumer market individual users adopting AI tools for personal or semi-professional use has driven much of the early app growth and influenced enterprise buying behavior.
This feels like a familiar pattern from past technology shifts, doesn't it? Like the early days of the internet or mobile, where consumer adoption often paved the way and influenced enterprise decisions. Consumer tech bleeding into enterprise.
It's a very similar dynamic at play, and the report explicitly draws that parallel. The core finding is that much of the early growth and influence on enterprise buying behavior for the leading AI applications has originated in the prosumer market.
How exactly do strong consumer brands or prosumer tools translate into strong enterprise demand and buying behavior in this context? How does that work?
The report explains the mechanism primarily through employee adoption and bottom-up demand. The initial exposure and positive experience that employees have using AI tools for their personal tasks, creative projects, or semi-professional side hustles.
Right, using it at home.
Yeah, perhaps using ChatGPT for writing help, Midjourney for image generation, 11 Labs for audio creation, or AI coding assistants for personal coding projects. This creates a groundswell of familiarity, preference, and demand within the organization. Employees bring their positive experiences with these tools into the workplace and ask for enterprise versions or equivalents.
The report gives examples of applications where this dynamic has been particularly impactful.
Yes, they note that the initial explosion of interest and prosumer adoption was undeniably kicked off by ChatGPT. And this trend of prosumer popularity translating into enterprise demand is underscored by the growth of other leading enterprise AI apps in categories like coding assistants, like Cursor, creator tools such as 11 Labs, and general productivity tools.
And the report includes a quote specifically from CIOs about why they ended up purchasing enterprise versions of tools like ChatGPT. What was the reason?
Yes. The report highlights that a frequently cited reason by CIOs for their decision to purchase enterprise-grade versions of tools like ChatGPT was directly driven by employee demand. They were quoted saying it was because employees loving ChatGPT. It's the brand name they know.
Huh. So the employees basically demanded it.
This powerfully illustrates the influence of bottom-up employee familiarity and demand, fueled by positive prosumer experiences, in influencing enterprise purchasing decisions, especially for tools that enhance individual knowledge worker productivity.
So this dual market pull bottom-up adoption driven by positive prosumer experiences and brand recognition, combined with traditional top-down enterprise procurement processes, is accelerating the growth trajectory for this next generation of AI-native companies compared to past technology shifts that might have been purely top-down enterprise sales cycles.
It provides AI-native companies with a unique advantage in gaining enterprise traction quickly, leveraging viral adoption and employee advocacy.
The final point in the report, point 16, provides a direct comparison between the performance and trajectory of AI-native companies versus established incumbents in the market. Who's winning?
Point 16 is significant finding. AI native quality and speed are increasingly starting to outpace incumbents.
Incumbents, the large established technology companies, traditionally hold significant advantages in the enterprise market. They have established brand trust, deep existing customer relationships, and robust distribution channels. But the report suggests the dynamics of the AI era are different.
That's the core finding. While incumbents certainly possess those traditional advantages, the report argues that AI-native competitors, companies built around AI from the ground up, are increasingly outperforming incumbents when it comes to product quality, innovation velocity, and delivering truly superior outcomes.
What are the core reasons the report identifies for this outperformance by the AI-native vendors? Why are they faster or better?
The primary reason cited is simply their faster innovation rate. Companies built as AI-native organizations are structured and culturally geared to move quickly in this space. They are designed to constantly integrate the latest model advancements, rapidly develop new AI-powered features, and iterate based on fast-changing AI capabilities.
Right, they're built for speed and AI.
Incumbents, often burdened by legacy systems, established processes, and broader portfolios, just struggle to match this pace.
And the second key reason?
The second reason is the recognition that companies that are built around AI from the ground up deliver fundamentally better products with superior outcomes compared to incumbents who are often trying to retrofit AI capabilities onto existing, sometimes legacy product architectures.
Yeah, bolting AI on versus building with AI.
Yeah, exactly. It's fundamentally difficult to simply bolt on truly transformative AI capability to a system or product that wasn't designed with AI at its core. AI-native companies build the entire product around the AI, leveraging its capabilities at a foundational level to deliver a fundamentally different and often superior user experience and set of outcomes.
The gap is particularly clear in the software development use case we discussed earlier, based on the report's findings.
Yes, they revisit the software development example to illustrate this point vividly. A CIO at a public security company highlighted a stark difference in capabilities between what he termed first-generation AI coding tools, which were often incumbent attempts to add AI features to existing IDEs or platforms, and second-generation AI coding tools, which are typically the AI-native solutions. He noted this difference was particularly pronounced as coding tasks became more agentic, requiring deeper, more integrated AI capabilities that the AI-native tools were built to handle.
And the report mentions user satisfaction data, reinforcing this perceived gap in quality and effectiveness. Users notice the difference.
Yes. They note that user satisfaction data further underscores this gap. For instance, users who adopted AI-native coding solutions like Cursor showed notably lower satisfaction with their previous generation tools, including established options like GitHub Copilot, after experiencing the capabilities of a purpose-built AI-first coding tool.
Wow, so users prefer the new tools once they try them.
This isn't just anecdotal, it's data suggesting that AI-native approaches are fundamentally reshaping user expectations and delivering a qualitatively different level of effectiveness.
This finding represents a major challenge for established incumbents in virtually every software category. It requires them to not just add superficial AI features, but potentially fundamentally rethink their product architectures, development speed, and innovation processes to remain competitive.
It's a huge wake-up call for them.
For AI-native companies, it highlights a massive opportunity to disrupt established markets and gain significant market share by delivering genuinely superior results powered by building AI-first solutions.
It's a clear signal that in the AI era, simply having an established brand name or existing distribution channels isn't enough. Superior performance, user experience driven by deep AI integration, and rapid innovation velocity are becoming key differentiators that can quickly reshape market leadership.
So those are the 16 key changes highlighted in the Andreessen Horowitz report, covering the dramatic shifts in enterprise AI budgets, the evolving landscape and adoption of AI models, the increasing rigor and dynamics of AI procurement, and the significant rise of off-the-shelf AI applications and the companies building them.
Yeah, quite a list.
To wrap things up, the report offers a concluding perspective on the overall state of the enterprise AI landscape as we look ahead. What's the final takeaway?
The report's final perspective is that the enterprise AI landscape, as evidenced by these 16 changes, is no longer accurately characterized by experimentation or tentative exploration. It is now firmly defined by strategic deployment, significant and rapidly increasing budget commitment, and a rapidly maturing vendor ecosystem of both model providers and application builders.
And they briefly recap the key trends we've discussed one last time.
Yes, they summarize that model choice is diversifying, with fragmentation by specific use case being not only expected but increasingly embraced as a strategy to optimize performance. They note that key leaders are clearly emerging in the model space, though the landscape remains dynamic. They reiterate that procurement processes are becoming significantly structured and rigorous, mirroring traditional software buying. And they emphasize the increasing shift from internal builds to adopting off-the-shelf applications as the preferred route to accelerate adoption and capture tangible ROI.
And their final thought on the overall market structure going forward. How does it look?
They conclude by stating that the market structure for enterprise AI is starting to look more like traditional software markets in terms of its processes, evaluation criteria, and vendor dynamics, things like rigorous procurement cycles, reliance on benchmarks for filtering, considerations of switching costs, and the emergence of specialized application vendors.
Okay, so it's normalizing in some ways.
Yet, and this is the critical point, it continues to move and evolve with the unprecedented speed and inherent complexity unique to AI technologies.
Right.
This duality, the blend of traditional enterprise structures with AI's inherent dynamism and rapid innovation, is what fundamentally defines the current landscape and will shape its future.
That duality is a powerful and accurate way to summarize the current state. You can rely on some familiar frameworks and processes from traditional enterprise technology adoption, but you have to be constantly prepared for a pace of change and a level of technological complexity that is fundamentally different and faster than what most enterprises are used to.
It requires a willingness to adapt strategies and assumptions rapidly, constant vigilance.
So let's bring it all back to you, the listener, and quickly recap the most impactful points from this deep dive. AI spend within enterprises is not just growing, it's massive and accelerating incredibly fast, moving strategically out of innovation budgets and into core operational and product costs.
Huge budget shifts.
The multi-model world is absolutely here to stay, driven by the fact that models genuinely differentiate on performance for specific use cases. And while the landscape is crowded, OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic have emerged as clear leaders, according to this report.
Right, differentiation is key.
Buying AI is adopting the seriousness and rigor of traditional enterprise software procurement, with heavy focus on security and cost, although the complexity of agentic workflows is ironically increasing switching costs for advanced applications.
Procurement is getting serious, but lock-in is creeping back.
And finally, the AI application ecosystem is maturing at a remarkable pace, with a strong and accelerating shift from building custom internal tools to buying specialized, best-in-class third-party applications.
Buy over build is winning.
Particularly in killer use cases like software development, driven partly by bottom-up prosumer adoption, and AI-native companies are demonstrating a clear ability to outperform established incumbents in both speed and quality.
Yeah, the AI natives are setting the pace. These are fundamental high-impact shifts that are reshaping how technology is adopted, managed, and budgeted for within large organizations.
Understanding these profound changes in spending patterns, underlying technology adoption curves, purchasing behaviors, and the competitive landscape is absolutely crucial. Whether you're building AI products and trying to figure out your go-to-market strategy, selling them into enterprises and needing to know where the budget lives and what criteria matter, or simply trying to stay informed and figure out how to best leverage these capabilities within your own company or career, these insights from the report provide a vital shortcut to navigating this rapidly evolving market.
It requires adapting your strategy to match this dynamic new reality of enterprise AI adoption. You can't stand still.
To leave you with a thought, to ponder based on everything we've covered today from this compelling report. Given the striking speed at which AI-native companies are demonstrating an ability to outpace established incumbents by building solutions designed around AI from the ground up,
Yeah.
and considering the rising switching costs associated with deploying complex agentic workflows that become deeply embedded in a specific model, are we entering an era where choosing the right foundational AI partner or core AI application early becomes one of the single most critical, potentially long-lasting strategic decisions an enterprise can make?
Ooh, that's a big one. Choosing early sets your path.
Or looking internally at your own organization? With AI budgets growing so rapidly and shifting into core operations, what previously manual, inefficient, or complex business process in your department or company could be the next killer use case, ripe for disruption and dramatic transformation by a specialized AI application.
Pondering those questions is indeed key to staying ahead and navigating this rapidly evolving landscape effectively. Where's the next 90% code gen opportunity?
Lots to think about there. Thanks for diving deep with us on this important report.